Hello and welcome to Lost Love Chronicles.
Dear listeners, before we get started, drop a quick hi in the comments and let us know where you're tuning in from. Now let's start with the story. I used to think my life was pretty solid. I had a decent job as a mechanic at a local garage, a rented house in an okay neighborhood, and a wife, Ariana, whom I'd been with since college. Nothing fancy, but stable. You know, I worked hard, paid the bills on time, and thought I was building something that would last. Ariana and I weren't perfect, but whose relationship is? We had our routines, our inside jokes, our plans for the future, or at least, that's what I thought. Then, about 2 years ago, everything blew up in my face. I came home early from work one day, hoping to surprise Ariana for our anniversary. I wanted it to be a good surprise, something to show her I cared. But when I walked in, I found her in our bed, screwing our neighbor. I'm not even exaggerating. The look on her face when she saw me standing there wasn't embarrassment or guilt. No, it was pure annoyance, like I was the one who'd ruined her moment. That's when I realized our 6-year marriage was dead long before I even opened that bedroom door. The next few weeks were a nightmare. A blur of arguments, fake apologies, and me crashing on my buddy Mike's couch, trying not to lose my mind. Ariana kept insisting it was just a mistake, that we could work through it. But then I found the texts. Months and months of them. This wasn't a one-time slip-up. She'd been cheating on me pretty much our entire marriage. When I confronted her, she just shrugged and said, "You don't understand. It was complicated." I wanted to scream. Complicated? We were married, Ariana. You're supposed to be my partner. She just looked away. The divorce was brutal. She tried to take everything, including the car I'd bought before we met her. Her lawyer was some shark in a suit who treated me like dirt. Meanwhile, I could barely afford my own lawyer, who seemed more interested in his lunch break than my case. But the worst betrayal wasn't even from Ariana. It was from my sister, Brooklyn. We'd always been close, or so I thought. She's a 29-year-old single mom with 2 kids. I helped her out whenever I could. Bought school supplies for my niece and nephew. Fixed her car countless times. Even paid her rent twice when she was between jobs. How did she repay me? By siding completely with Ariana. Not because she thought I deserved to be cheated on, but because Ariana was buying her new clothes, taking her out to fancy restaurants, even babysitting so Brooklyn could go on dates. And the cherry on top? Ariana promised to hook her up with this supposed rich friend of the guy she was cheating with. Brooklyn was literally trading her loyalty for the chance at a sugar daddy. You probably drove her to cheat anyway. She told me over the phone when I called her, like I was the one to blame. Brooklyn said she was still hanging out with Ariana and that men never understand what women need. That was the moment I realized I was truly on my own. I hung up, blocked her number, and made a decision right then. I was going to rebuild my life, if it killed me. I packed up the few things Ariana's lawyer let me keep and found the cheapest apartment I could. It was basically a shoebox with a bathroom attached, the kind of place where you can cook dinner, watch TV, and use the toilet without even getting up from your bed. Yeah, that's small. I remember sitting on that lumpy mattress the first night, wondering how the hell my life had collapsed so fast. Like, 6 months before, I was married, had a decent place to live, thought my sister had my back, and was actually pretty happy. Now, I was in a crappy apartment that smelled like the previous tenant's cats. My wife was screwing half the neighborhood, and my sister was Team Ariana all the way. The worst part was seeing their Instagram posts. Ariana and Brooklyn suddenly BFFs, posting selfies at restaurants I could never afford to take Ariana to, with these long captions about living your best life and toxic people. Meaning me, obviously. One time, they even posted from a weekend trip to the beach, something Ariana and I had always talked about taking but never had the money for. Guess she found the money once I wasn't in the picture. My parents weren't much help either. They kept telling me to try to work things out with Ariana because marriage is about compromise. When I told them about catching her literally in bed with another dude, my mom said, "Well, relationships are complicated, honey." Yeah, no kidding, Mom. I think that's what hurt the most. Everyone acting like I was overreacting by being upset that my wife was cheating. Like I was the unreasonable one for not wanting to stay with someone who had been lying to my face for years. The breaking point came about a month after I moved into that shoebox apartment. I was at the grocery store, picking up my usual ramen and cheap coffee, basically my entire diet at that point. I spotted Brooklyn loading up her cart with expensive snacks, the kind of stuff she'd never been able to afford before. I tried to avoid her, but of course, she spotted me first. She came over with this fake concerned look on her face. "Oh my God, you look terrible," she said, eyeing my cart. "Are you eating enough?" Before I could even answer, she launched into a story about how Ariana was doing so much better now. How her new boyfriend, the neighbor she'd been cheating with, was generous and had taken them all out to some fancy restaurant last weekend. "You know," she said, leaning in like she was sharing some big secret. Ariana told me everything about why your marriage failed. You really should have paid more attention to her needs. I just stared at her, not even knowing how to respond. My own sister, the girl I'd helped raise after our dad left when she was 12, was standing there basically telling me I deserved to be cheated on. Then she smirked and added, Ariana's new boy might have a friend you'd like. Someone who can afford better groceries than this. She gestured at my cart. I didn't say a word. I just left my groceries right there in the aisle and walked out. That night, I made a plan. I was done feeling sorry for myself. Done letting Ariana and Brooklyn make me feel like I was the problem. I was going to rebuild my life from scratch, and I was going to do it so well that they'd choke on their words. My goal was to work my ass off until I could afford a place of my own, a real place, not a depressing shoebox. Something that was mine, that no one could take away from me. Revenge would taste sweet in the end. So my routine went insane, probably not healthy, but I didn't care. I'd wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and hit the crappy gym in my apartment building. Basically just a treadmill and some dumbbells shoved into a closet. Then I'd get to the garage by 6:30 and work until 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock in the evening. Sometimes later if we had emergency repairs. After that, I'd grab some cheap takeout, go home, and study until my eyes couldn't stay open anymore. Weekends weren't any better. I picked up side jobs fixing cars for cash, changing oil, replacing brake pads, swapping out alternators. Basic stuff I could do in parking lots with minimal tools. It wasn't exactly legal, but it paid, and I needed every dollar. The manager, Rick, started giving me more responsibilities at the shop. At first, it was just ordering parts and talking to customers. Then he let me handle the scheduling and some of the hiring. By month 6, I was basically running the place while he supervised, aka played solitaire in the back office. One day while we were locking up, Rick said, I've owned this place for almost 30 years. Never had someone work as hard as you do. What's driving you, kid? I thought about telling him the whole sad story, the cheating wife, the backstabbing sister, the whole mess, but instead I just said, trying to buy a house. He nodded like that made perfect sense. Good goal. Nothing better than having your own place. No landlord to answer to. No worrying about rent going up. Smart move. That simple validation meant more to me than he probably realized. In a world where everyone seemed to think I was the bad guy for being upset about being cheated on, having someone just say good job was huge. The funny thing is, even though I was working nonstop, I started feeling better. The constant activity kept me from sitting around feeling sorry for myself. Seeing actual progress in my bank account every month gave me something to focus on besides how much my life sucked. Don't get me wrong, I still had bad days. Days when I'd see a post from Ariana or Brooklyn and have to resist the urge to throw my phone against the wall. Days when a customer would come in who reminded me of Ariana and I'd get flashbacks of her cheating. But those days got fewer and farther between as time passed. The online classes were tough, though. I hadn't been a great student in high school, and trying to learn accounting principles after a 12-hour shift fixing cars was brutal. I failed the first practice exam so badly that my online tutor actually called me to ask if I was okay. But I kept at it, studying during lunch breaks, watching tutorial videos while waiting for parts deliveries, drilling myself with flashcards before bed. Slowly, painfully, I started to get it. The more I understood, the more I could see how Rick's business could be improved. He was still doing everything old school. Paper invoices, no real inventory system, pricing based on gut feeling rather than actual costs. One night after closing, I showed him a spreadsheet I'd made analyzing the last 6 months of jobs. I'd broken down which services made the most profit, which customers were repeat business, which suppliers gave us the best deals. It was basic stuff I'd learned in my classes, but Rick looked at me like I'd just performed magic. Where did you learn to do all this? He asked, scrolling through my analysis. Online classes, I said. Been taking them at night. He gave me this long look, then said something that changed everything. You know, I've been thinking about selling this place when I retire. Always figured I'd just close up shop. But you interested in buying me out someday? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Own the garage. Actually be my own boss. It seemed impossible. I don't have that kind of money. Rick, I said. He waved his hand dismissively. We could work something out. Payment plan. You taking over more and more while I phase out. I'd rather sell to someone who gives a damn than some corporation that'll fire everyone and jack up prices. It was the first time in ages that I felt like maybe things might work out. Not just getting by, but actually building something. Having a future that I controlled. That night, I went home and added another goal to my list. Not just buy a house, but buy the garage too. It would take longer, require even more work, but the thought of owning my own business, being completely independent, was too good to pass up. About a year into my nonstop grind, things at the shop were going great. Rick had basically made me the manager, and our business was up 30% since I'd started running things. I was saving every penny that didn't go to rent or food. My social life was non-existent, but I didn't care. I had a plan. Then I started hearing whispers that things weren't so perfect in Ariana and Brooklyn land. The guy Ariana had been cheating with? Yeah, he'd moved on to someone else barely 2 months after our divorce was final. Apparently, he wasn't interested in anything serious. And that rich sugar daddy Ariana had promised to introduce Brooklyn to? Turned out he was just some broke dude pretending to be rich to get into clubs. When Brooklyn finally met him, he tried to get her to pay for dinner. The shopping trips slowed down. The fancy vacations stopped. Ariana had blown through most of her divorce money, trying to impress her new boyfriend, who'd now ditched her. Brooklyn, who did quit her steady job at the insurance office thinking she was about to land a rich guy, was struggling to find work again. I heard all this through Mike, who was still friends with Ariana's cousin. I didn't say anything when he told me, didn't laugh or say I told you so, just nodded and kept working on the transmission I was fixing. But inside, I'm not going to lie, it felt good to know karma was finally showing up. Rick noticed how much effort I was putting in and offered me a deal I never expected. He wanted to start the process of me buying him out of the business. You're running it anyway, he said. Might as well own it. We worked out a payment plan that would take years, but it was doable. Between that and my savings, I finally had enough for a down payment on a modest house in a decent neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but it would be mine. The day I signed the papers for the house, I immediately got a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was Brooklyn. Somehow she'd gotten a new phone and wanted to reconnect. Said she missed her brother and how family should stick together. I didn't respond. I was too busy planning my move. Then one Saturday, I was at the shop late finishing up a complicated engine rebuild when Rick came in. He usually didn't work weekends, so I was surprised to see him. Don't you ever take a day off? He asked, shaking his head. I shrugged. Got nowhere else to be. He sat down on the stool next to my workbench. Look, I've been meaning to talk to you about something. My wife and I are thinking about moving to Arizona. Her arthritis is getting worse and the cold winters here aren't helping. The doctor says a warmer climate would be good for her. My heart sank. Was he selling the garage to someone else after all my hard work? So what happens to the shop? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. Rick looked at me like I was an idiot. That's what I want to talk about. I'm ready to accelerate our plan. Instead of the 5-year buyout we discussed, I want to do it in 2. You take over as owner at the end of the year. We work out a payment schedule you can handle, and I head west for some sunshine. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was happening way faster than I'd expected. I don't know if I have enough saved for that kind of down payment yet. I admit it. I just put most of my savings toward the house. Rick waved his hand dismissively. We'll figure it out. You've already increased business by 30%. The place is worth more with you running it anyway. Maybe we adjust the percentages a bit. You get a bigger cut of the profits now, but more of that goes toward your ownership stake. We spent the next hour working out the details. By the time he left, we had the outline of a deal that would make me the owner of Rick's Auto Repair by Christmas. It wasn't perfect. I'd be stretching myself financially for a couple of years, but it was doable. And the thought of owning my own business before I turned 35? That was worth the risk. As I was locking up the shop, my phone buzzed with another text from Brooklyn. This one was less friendly than the first. Seriously? You're just going to ignore me after everything I've done for you? Real mature, bro. I snorted. Everything she'd done for me. Like trash-talking me to my ex-wife. Mocking my pain while I was at my lowest point. Choosing Ariana's empty promises over her own brother. I typed out about 5 different angry responses, deleted them all, and finally settled on. Busy with work. Talk later. It was non-committal enough that she couldn't accuse me of ignoring her, but vague enough that later could mean basically never. I had no interest in letting Brooklyn back into my life just because her meal ticket had disappeared. When I got home to my crappy apartment that night, I looked around at the packed boxes and cheap furniture and felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time: pride. In just a few days, I'd be moving into my own house. In a few months, I'd own my own business. And I'd done it all by myself, while the people who were supposed to love me were betting on my failure. Because nothing in this life is perfect, the next morning I got a call from the real estate agent. The seller was trying to back out, claiming they got a better offer. My stomach dropped, but the agent reassured me the contract was airtight. It would just delay closing by a couple of weeks while their lawyers set them straight. Annoying, but after the year I'd had, one more obstacle wasn't going to stop me. 3 days before I was set to move into my new place, there was a knock at my apartment door. I wasn't expecting anyone, and the few friends I had left knew I was busy packing. I opened the door to find Brooklyn standing there, looking nothing like the confident woman who'd mocked me at the garage a year ago. Her hair was a mess, her clothes wrinkled, and she had this desperate look on her face that I recognized. It was the same look she used to have before asking me for money. "Hey stranger," she said, trying to sound casual. "Can I come in?" I didn't move from the doorway. What do you want, Brooklyn? She forced a laugh. Can't a sister just visit her brother? It's been forever. Yeah, I said, crossing my arms. About a year since you came to the shop to brag about Ariana's diamond bracelet. Her fake smile dropped. Look, I made some mistakes, okay? I was stupid. Ariana fed me all these lies about you, and I believed her. I'm sorry. I laughed, sharp and bitter. Where's Ariana now? Still buying you stuff? Brooklyn's eyes dropped to the floor. We're not really hanging out anymore. She's going through some stuff. That meant Ariana wasn't useful to her anymore. I sighed again. What do you want, Brooklyn? That's when she noticed the boxes behind me. Are you moving? Yep, I said. Bought a house. Closing was last week. Her eyes lit up like I'd just handed her a winning lottery ticket. A house. That's amazing. How many bedrooms? And there it was. I could see the wheels turning in her head. 3, I said, knowing exactly where this was going. That's perfect, she exclaimed, way too enthusiastically. Because, well, I'm kind of in a situation. My landlord's selling the building, and we have to be out by the end of the month. The kids and I have been looking, but you know how crazy rent is these days. I just stared at her, waiting for her to get to the point. So I was thinking, she continued, maybe we could help each other out. The kids and I could move in with you. We wouldn't be any trouble. I could help with bills once I find a new job, and the kids would love having their uncle around. The audacity was actually impressive. After everything, the betrayal, the mockery, the complete dismissal of my pain, she really thought she could just show up and get a free place to live? No, I said simply. Her smile faltered. What do you mean, no? I didn't sugarcoat it. I mean, no. You can't live with me. Not now. Not ever. She switched tactics immediately. Her eyes welled up with tears. But the kids, they have nowhere to go. We might end up in a shelter. Is that what you want? Your own niece and nephew homeless because you're too selfish to help? That's when I lost it. Not by yelling or slamming the door, but by laughing. I couldn't help it. The sheer manipulation was so transparent. Where were you when Ariana was screwing around behind my back? I asked, my voice cold. Where were you when I was sleeping on Mike's couch? When I lost my house, my savings, my marriage? Oh, right. You were shopping with the woman who destroyed my life, laughing about what a loser I was. Her face went pale. That's not, I didn't mean. I started to close the door, but she stuck her foot in the way. Please, she begged, real desperation in her voice. Now I have nowhere else to go. Mom and Dad won't help. Ariana's ghosting me. My friends, they can't take us in. That sounds like a you problem, I said, echoing the exact words she'd said to me when I told her Ariana had taken most of our joint account before I could freeze it. I moved her foot and closed the door. For about 5 minutes, she stood out there, knocking and calling my name. I ignored her completely, going back to packing boxes like she wasn't even there. Eventually, she gave up and left. I thought that would be the end of it. I should have known better. The next day, my phone started blowing up with texts and calls, not just from Brooklyn, but from my parents too. Apparently, Brooklyn had gone straight to them with some sob story about how I was refusing to help her and the kids in their time of need. My mom's voicemail was classic guilt trip material. I raised you better than this. Family helps family. I can't believe you would let your sister and those poor children suffer when you have a whole house to yourself. Never mind that my parents had barely reached out during my divorce. Never mind that they'd suggested I try to work things out with Ariana even after I told them about the cheating. Never mind that they'd done absolutely nothing to help me when I was the one in crisis. My dad's message was worse. Son, I'm disappointed in you. A man takes care of his family. Your sister needs help and you're in a position to provide it. That's your responsibility as her brother. I hadn't heard from him in months, and this was what finally got him to call, telling me I wasn't being man enough because I wouldn't let my backstabbing sister move into the house I'd worked my ass off to buy. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I focused on finishing my packing and coordinating with the moving company. I'd taken the day off from the garage specifically to get everything ready for the move, and I wasn't going to waste it dealing with family drama. Then came the text that really set me off. It was from Ariana. Yeah, my ex-wife. The woman who cheated on me for most of our marriage thought she had the right to weigh in. I know we're not on the best terms, but I'm really worried about Brooklyn and the kids, she said. You bought a house with plenty of room, but won't help them. That doesn't sound like the man I married. Please reconsider. The hypocrisy was so stunning I had to read it twice. I finally broke my silence with a single reply. The man you married no longer exists. You killed him. Do not contact me again. Then I blocked her number. By that evening, the messages from my family had taken on a more threatening tone. Mom was now saying she was going to have to get involved if I didn't do the right thing. Dad mentioned something about coming over to talk some sense into me. Brooklyn had switched from begging to angry accusations about how I was showing my true colors and always was the selfish one. I didn't care anymore. Let them come. Let them threaten. I was done being the family doormat. The next morning, I woke up to a new voicemail from an unknown number. It was Ariana's mother, my former mother-in-law, telling me she was very disappointed in how I was treating Brooklyn and that she had raised Ariana to believe family comes first. I nearly choked on my coffee. Yeah, Ariana really put family first when she was screwing the neighbor. I realized they were pulling out all the stops, contacting anyone they thought might have influence over me. It was pathetic and desperate, but also a little scary. How far were they willing to go? I decided to take some precautions. First thing, I called the real estate agent and explained my situation, family drama and all, and asked if we could move up the closing date. She said she'd try, but couldn't promise anything. Next, I called Rick and laid it all out for him. To my surprise, he was understanding. Actually, more than that, he offered to let me crash at his place if things with my family got too intense. Man, if they come knocking, you're welcome to stay here, Rick said. I got your back. That meant a lot. Then I called Mike. He'd been my rock through the divorce, the one person I could count on no matter what. Dude, he said the second I told him what was going on, they're only coming around now because you're doing well. Where were they when you were crashing on my couch? Screw them. It felt good to have people in my corner, even if they weren't blood relatives. That afternoon, the real estate agent called with good news. We can close tomorrow, she said. The seller finally accepted that they can't back out, and all the paperwork's ready. I was going to move into my new house 48 hours earlier than planned. I didn't tell anyone in my family about the change. Let them show up at my empty apartment. By then, I'd be safely in my new home, with a security system installed and no forwarding address left behind. Moving day came, and I left that crappy apartment behind for good. My new house wasn't anything special by most people's standards, but to me, it was everything. I spent that first night sitting on my back porch with a cold soda, staring up at the stars, feeling like I could finally breathe again. And I did something I probably shouldn't have. I posted a few photos of my new place on Facebook. Nothing flashy, just a simple, new chapter, new home. I knew Brooklyn would see the post. Hell, I knew my parents would see it too. Part of me wanted them to. The reactions were immediate. Friends I hadn't talked to in ages congratulated me. Guys from the shop liked the post. A few people from high school commented, telling me how well I was doing. Then the private messages started flooding in. My dad fired off a message about how disappointed he was that I would flaunt my success while my sister was struggling. My mom said I was being needlessly cruel. In Brooklyn, she went nuclear. She posted this long, dramatic rant on her page about how money changes people. She didn't tag me, but everyone knew exactly who she was talking about. I didn't engage with any of their drama. I just focused on the garage. Business was booming, and Rick was even talking about retiring earlier than planned. We were hammering out the details of me taking over completely within the next year. For the first time since that awful day I found Ariana with that guy, I was actually happy. Not just surviving, thriving. And I'd done it all on my own. But of course, they couldn't just let me be. 3 days after I moved in, my phone rang. It was my mom, calling from a new number I hadn't blocked yet. I picked up without checking the caller ID, thinking it might be a client from the garage. Hello? Finally, you answer. Her voice was that special mix of relief and accusation I'd come to recognize. We've been trying to reach you for days. I sighed, bracing myself. What do you want, Mom? What do I want? I want you to act like the son I raised. Your sister and those children are about to be homeless, and you're ignoring their calls while living in a big empty house all by yourself. I had to laugh. A big empty house, Mom? It's a modest 3-bedroom in a middle-ass neighborhood. And it's not empty. I live here. She snapped back. You have room. They need room. It's that simple. Nothing's ever that simple, I said, my voice steady but firm. Where was all this family concern when Ariana was cheating on me? When I was the one who lost everything? There was a pause on the line. Then, in a softer voice, she said, that was different. How? How was it different? I demanded. You're a man. She said like that explained everything. Men can take care of themselves. Brooklyn has children. And there it was, the double standard that had defined my entire relationship with my family. I was expected to handle everything on my own, to sacrifice, to be the strong one. But Brooklyn? She got endless excuses. Mom, I said, keeping my voice calm even though it was hard. I worked 80-hour weeks for 2 years to afford this house. I took online classes after 12-hour shifts at the garage. I lived in an apartment where the bathroom ceiling leaked every time the upstairs neighbor took a shower. I did all that by myself, without help from anyone, especially not my family. So no, I said firmly, Brooklyn can't live with me. She made her choice when she sided with Ariana, and now she can deal with the consequences. She made a mistake, my mom insisted, her voice almost pleading. People make mistakes, I agreed. Yeah, they do. And sometimes those mistakes have consequences that can't be fixed with a simple sorry. This is one of those times. So you'll punish the children too? She shot back, her tone turning sharp. They didn't do anything wrong. That was a low blow. using my niece and nephew against me like that. I loved those kids, even though I hadn't seen them much since the divorce. But I knew exactly what would happen if I let Brooklyn move in. She'd never leave, and eventually, I'd end up supporting all three of them while she went back to her old ways. The kids have grandparents with a 4-bedroom house, I pointed out, hoping reason might finally crack through. Why aren't they moving in with you and Dad? There was another telling pause on the line. Your father and I are too old to have children running around. We need our peace and quiet. They wanted to use my house as a dumping ground for Brooklyn's problems so they wouldn't have to deal with them. Well, I need my peace and quiet too, I said, voice steady but fierce. After the past 2 years, I've earned it. This isn't over, my mom warned before hanging up. And she was right. It wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The next day I came home from work to find Brooklyn's car parked right in my driveway. She was sitting on my front porch with her kids, surrounded by suitcases and garbage bags full of clothes. What the hell is this? I asked, stepping out of my truck, shock and anger rising in my chest. We got evicted, she said loud enough for the neighbors to hear. We have nowhere else to go. The kids looked confused and tired, their faces worn from too much worry for too long. I felt bad for them, I really did. But this level of manipulation made my blood boil. So you thought you'd just show up at my house with all your stuff without even asking? I said defiantly. You wouldn't let your own niece and nephew be homeless? She was trying to back me into a corner, using the kids as shields. It was a dirty move, but exactly what I'd expect from her. Get in your car and leave, I said firmly. Now, she challenged me, voice sharp. Or what? You'll call the cops on your own sister with her kids right here? I took a deep breath, trying to keep my calm. Brooklyn, this isn't going to work. I'm not letting you guilt me into this. Take the kids to Mom and Dad's. She shook her head. They won't take us. Then call Ariana, I suggested. You two were best friends, remember? Shopping buddies? She can put you up. Brooklyn's face darkened. Ariana and I? We're not really talking anymore. Shocking, I muttered under my breath. I softened my tone just a bit. Look, I feel for the kids, I really do. But you can't stay here. Brooklyn spat, acting all high and mighty. Because you've got a house now? Newsflash, you're still the same loser Ariana cheated on. No wonder she couldn't stay faithful. Who'd want to be with someone so selfish and cold? And just like that, any guilt I might have felt vanished. That was the real Brooklyn. The one who had mocked my pain. Who had chosen Ariana over her own brother. Who was now trying to manipulate me using her children. Get off my property, I said coldly. Now, or I really will call the cops. She must have seen something in my face that told her I meant it, because she started gathering up her bags. Come on, kids, she said loudly, trying to sound brave. Your uncle doesn't want us. We'll figure something out on our own, like we always do. A week after Brooklyn's little stun on my porch, I thought things would finally settle down. I had my house, my business, my peace. But people like her and Ariana, they don't go down without one last desperate attempt. I knew better this time, so I took precautions. The morning after Brooklyn's stunt, I went straight to the county clerk's office and filed for a no trespassing order against her. The process was easier than I expected. Turns out when someone shows up with bags and kids trying to force their way into your home, that's actual grounds for concern. The police officer I spoke to said I had enough evidence to enforce it immediately. She also suggested I install cameras, just in case Brooklyn tried anything again. So that's exactly what I did. By noon, I had security cameras covering every inch of my property, with motion alerts sent straight to my phone. Let Brooklyn try another sob story ambush. I'd have the cops at my doorstep before she could get comfortable. But then Ariana showed up. Out of nowhere. It was late, close to midnight, and I was just pulling up after a long day at the garage. The porch light caught a figure sitting on my front steps, arms wrapped around herself. It took me a second, but when she looked up, I recognized her. Ariana. She looked terrible. Nothing like the put-together woman who used to flaunt new jewelry on Instagram while mocking me behind my back. Her hair was a mess, bags under her eyes, and she looked smaller somehow, like life had finally knocked her down a few pegs. Matt, she said, voice weak. I didn't know where else to go. I laughed, the sheer audacity hitting me like a punch. Not my problem, I said, stepping around her to unlock the door. Please, she said, standing quickly. Just talk to me. I sighed. Talk about what? Ariana? How you cheated on me for years. How you ran through the divorce money and got dumped. Or maybe how you encouraged my sister to turn against me. Pick one. She flinched, but didn't say a word. I made mistakes, she whispered, swallowing hard. I was stupid. I thought. She stopped, rubbing her arms like she was trying to hold herself together. I thought I had everything figured out, but I didn't. He left me mad. Just like that. One day I woke up and he was gone. Took everything. I lost my job, my apartment. I'm back at my mom's place and she's threatening to kick me out. Sounds like karma, I said, stepping inside. She grabbed my arm before I could close the door. I loved you, she blurted, tears in her eyes. I know I messed up, but we had something real. Don't you ever miss it? I stared at her for a long moment, then smiled. No, I said, and shut the door in her face. I stood there listening as she cried outside for a minute before finally giving up and leaving. I didn't feel a damn thing. She was just another person from my past desperate to claw her way back in, but that door was locked, and I was never opening it again. Ariana's failed attempt must have leaked, because 2 days later my parents showed up unannounced. I opened the door to see my mom standing there with her arms crossed, my dad already looking pissed. We need to talk, my mom said, stepping past me like she still had some authority over me. I let them in, if only to get it over with. They didn't waste time. Your sister's in trouble, my dad started. She needs a place to stay. A good son would help her. A good son, I repeated, laughing bitterly. Funny, I don't remember hearing from you when I was the one who needed help. My mom's face hardened. That was different. You're a man. Brooklyn has children. I told her to take them to you. I shot back, but I guess your peace and quiet is more important, huh? You want me to be the responsible one, but only when it benefits you. My dad stood up, voice cold. You're selfish. You let money change you. You're not the son we raised. That hit, but not in the way they intended. I just nodded. You're right. I'm not the son you raised. That guy would have let himself be guilted into taking care of a woman who betrayed him. That guy would have kept giving to people who never gave back. That guy would have let his family walk all over him. I looked them both in the eye. But that guy's gone. And you should probably leave. My mom huffed, grabbing her purse. You'll regret this. Doubt it, I said, holding the door open. They left without another word. I closed the door behind them, locked it, and stood there for a second, taking it all in. I wasn't their son anymore. Good. I didn't need to be. I had a house, a business, a future. I'd built it all from scratch. And as I stood in my own home with nobody left to drag me down, I realized something. I was finally free. Now for the second story. Ember and I broke up right after our twins were born. We hadn't been together long. Just about 14 months when she found out she was pregnant. I remember how panicked we both were at first. It was like, what now? How do we handle this? We thought maybe we should try to make it work, for the kids' sake. You know how it goes. You figure having a family will just somehow make the relationship fall into place. I'll admit, though, we weren't exactly compatible from the start. We had our moments, some good times, sure, but it never felt like a deep, long-lasting connection. When she told me she was pregnant, I thought maybe we could push through it. Maybe having the babies would bring us closer. But honestly, we were about as compatible as chalk and cheese. Still, for the twins, we gave it our best shot for a while. Things were okay for a bit. Sure, we had arguments. What couple doesn't? But nothing major. We co-parented well enough, and we weren't constantly at each other's throats. Then, one day, Ember sat me down. I could tell something was up. Colton, she said quietly, I met someone. I nodded, trying to keep my cool. Someone I think I can have a future with, she added. I took a breath. I get it, I said. You want a fresh start, something different from what we had. She looked relieved I wasn't angry or upset. Yeah, I think splitting up is for the best. And honestly, I couldn't argue. The relationship wasn't solid to begin with. I wasn't heartbroken. We ended things amicably, at least as amicably as breakups go. After that, we found our rhythm with co-parenting. Things got smooth, or as smooth as they can be when two people are raising kids from separate homes. We split the time evenly, kept communication focused on the kids, and made a real effort not to let any tension affect the twins. Because of that, we didn't even bother with child support. We split everything evenly. 2 years after we split, Ember met her now husband. This guy wasn't the one she started dating right after our breakup. He was someone new. Here's the thing. Ember's new husband had a daughter about the same age as our twins. When she first told me about him, how serious things were getting, I wanted to be supportive. I figured it might make things easier for the kids if we all tried to get along. Honestly, I was fine with them having another father figure around. But things started shifting when Ember casually brought up including her stepdaughter in the same way we included our twins, like doing everything together as one big family. She threw it out there like it was no big deal. Wouldn't it be nice if we all did things as one family? She said, smiling like it was an obvious idea. At first, I thought it was harmless. I figured she was just trying to blend our families in a way that made sense for the kids. But then it got strange. She began suggesting that I treat her stepdaughter like my own. I want to be clear, I have nothing against her stepdaughter. She's just a kid caught in the middle of all this. But Ember seemed to think that because we were connected through the twins, I was somehow obligated to include her stepdaughter in every single activity and outing I had with my kids. One day I told her straight up, Ember, I get that you want everyone included, but I'm not the stepdad here. I can't take on being a dad to your husband's daughter. She looked a little hurt, but kept pushing, Colton, it's not just about me. It's about the kids feeling like one family. They should all have the same experiences. I took a deep breath and said, I'm already doing my best to be a good dad to our twins. I don't have the time or energy to take on a third child who isn't mine. It was hard not to get frustrated. Co-parenting isn't easy. You're always trying to balance what's best for your kids, keep peace with your ex, and now there's a new person involved who's trying to change the rules. Then the expectations started piling up. Things really took a turn when she began expecting me to babysit her stepdaughter whenever I had the twins. Like if I planned a weekend outing with my kids, I'd get a call from Ember. Hey, could you take Emily along too? We've got something going on, and it'd really help if you could watch her. I didn't mind the occasional favor, but it quickly became the norm. Don't get me wrong, I'm happy to help here and there. But I didn't sign up to be a third parent to her husband's kid. And honestly, I didn't see how that was fair to me or my own kids. After some time, I started to realize something. Every time I planned something special for my twins, it somehow turned into a thing about the other kids in Ember's household. It was like I wasn't allowed to have time just with my own kids anymore. Like one weekend, I decided to surprise the twins with a day at the zoo. I got them tickets and some little gifts. But before the day even arrived, Ember called me. Colton, she said, it's not really fair if Emily doesn't get to come too. She's their stepsister, you know. They should all have the same experiences. I remember feeling frustrated, but trying to stay calm. Ember, I get that you want everyone included. But this day is for my twins. It's not always about making everyone else fit in. She sighed. I just want the kids to feel like one family. That sounded nice, but the reality was different. One time, I bought gifts for the twins and didn't get as much for her stepdaughter. Ember got upset about that. She said it wasn't fair and that I was showing favoritism. I had to draw the line somewhere. So, I decided to keep my time and resources focused on my twins. I explained this to Ember as clearly as I could. Look, Ember, I want my twins to feel loved and included, but I'm not responsible for supporting kids who aren't mine in the same way. That's just not fair, to me or to them. She didn't take it well. You're being selfish, she said sharply. You're not supporting my whole family. I shook my head, feeling the tension rise. I'm not against your family, Ember, but I didn't sign up for this big blended family idea. My role is to be a dad to my twins. That's it. She looked disappointed, but at least we kept things civil enough to continue co-parenting. Since that conversation, I'd say we've been more parallel parenting than true co-parenting, if that makes sense. We mostly stick to our own time with the kids and rarely do anything together as one big family. We don't share plans or mix the kids from her house with mine. It keeps things simple, and it lets me focus on my own kids without extra expectations hanging over my head. Still, every now and then, Ember brings it up like I'm supposed to feel guilty for not helping raise all the kids living under her roof. Over the years, her family situation has gotten even more complicated. She and her husband had a baby together, and later, they took in her husband's nephew. So now at her place, there's my twins, their stepsister, a step-cousin, and a half-sister. Ember tries to keep everyone as one big happy family. But I've made it clear, my role is with my kids, and that's it. It's complicated. Every time I think we've hit a point where things are settled, something new comes up. But I've stuck to my boundaries, and honestly, I don't think it's unreasonable to focus on the two kids who are actually mine. It's one thing to support Ember's decisions as a mother, but it's another thing entirely to be expected to parent everyone under her roof. Fast forward a bit, and that's when things really started going off the rails. Over the years, with more members added to Ember's household, it became harder and harder to keep my boundaries steady. At first, we had figured out a balance. I was doing my part as a dad, but I wasn't wrapped up in her new family situation. But Ember's expectations kept growing. It felt like every few months, there was something new she expected me to help with: her stepdaughter, her husband's nephew, their baby together. It was like they kept adding layers, and somehow, I was supposed to shoulder some of that load. Then came this whole school trip thing. The school my kids go to is small, so they're in a mixed-age class. That means my twins are in the same classroom as their stepsister and their step-cousin. Fair enough, I thought. It's unusual, but it works for the school, and it didn't bother me. What I didn't expect was how it would turn into a battle about money with their mom and stepdad, about what I was supposed to pay for. This trip was a big deal for the kids. Not just a little field trip, but a visit to an interactive museum that was supposed to be amazing. The school planned hands-on learning and workshops. Sure, it was pricey, but my twins were super excited, and it seemed like a great experience for them. I could cover the cost, so I thought, why not? I paid for the twins and told Ember about it, thinking she'd be glad they were getting this experience. Wrong. The minute I mentioned I'd paid for it, she went weirdly quiet on the phone. Then, flat out, she said, if the other kids can't go, it's not fair. I thought she was joking at first. There was no way she expected me to pay for the other two kids too. But she was dead serious. She said, It's not right for our kids to go on this luxury trip if her other kids can't go as well. I took a deep breath and tried to keep calm. I told her, I'm paying for my twins because they're my responsibility. Then I suggested, maybe you and your husband could try fundraising or saving up for the other kids if it meant that much. But then Ember hit me with this. They need to think about how they're all going to feel watching your kids go on this trip and being left behind. Like somehow, the whole household was going to fall apart if these kids didn't all get the same experiences. That's when things got heated. Her husband jumped in, his voice sharp, saying, it's unfair to treat the kids differently. I'm all for fairness, but there's a line here. I looked him straight in the eye and said, his stepsister and nephew aren't my responsibility, and I'm not made of money. I didn't hold back. I asked him bluntly, Shoo, why is it my job to pay for all the kids in your house? He gave me this look like I was the selfish one. Then he went off on this rant about how they're supposed to be siblings and how I was sabotaging their family. Look, I get it. No kid wants to feel left out. But at some point, they have to understand, I'm not their dad. Ember chose to bring these other kids into the picture and create this new blended family setup. That's her choice. I'm not about to be guilt-tripped into paying for every kid she brings under her roof. What really set me off was when they started making it sound like I was being cruel. They said this would damage the kids' relationships, that it would be my fault if our twins and their stepsister grew apart over something like this. Come on, I'm just a dad trying to do something nice for my own kids. And somehow, it's turned into family drama about what I'm not doing for kids who aren't mine. I said, Paul, look, I don't think it's fair to expect me to cover everyone's expenses. This trip is a treat for our twins. It's during my time with them, and I want them to go. I don't see how that's unfair to anyone. But Ember just kept going, saying that if our twins go and the other kids don't, they'll feel treated as less than, and I should care about that. Her husband even brought up family unity and said if the kids resent each other, it'd be on me. At that point, I was done. This wasn't about family unity. This was them making their financial choices and trying to make it my problem. It's not like they're struggling to get by either. They have decent jobs. If this trip meant that much, they could find a way to make it work without relying on me. It's not my job to stretch my finances to make up for what they can't or won't do. The argument went in circles. They kept bringing up fairness and how I should think about the family. But I stood my ground. I told them flat out it wasn't my fault they couldn't send the other kids, and that I wasn't going to let them guilt-trip me into paying for it. That's where we left it. But I could tell from the look on Ember's face that this was far from over. Honestly, I walked away from that conversation feeling irritated and confused. No matter how much I explained I wasn't responsible for all her family's kids, they weren't hearing it. Somehow, my focus on my own kids had become an issue, and I was being made out to be the villain in their family story. It's exhausting. I just wanted to do something nice for my twins, and now it's turned into this giant mess about fairness and unity. I feel like I'm walking a tightrope where every decision could spark another argument. All I wanted was to give my kids a fun experience, but apparently that's too much to ask. After the argument over the school trip, I figured that would be the end of it, at least for now. I thought I'd made it clear I wasn't paying for all the kids, and I hoped Debo and her husband would drop it. But nope, they weren't about to let it go without another round. What came next, though? I didn't expect it. A few days after the trip argument, I got a message from Ember saying she wanted to meet up to talk. I knew this wasn't going to be a friendly coffee date, but I figured it was better to get it over with than keep going back and forth through texts. I agreed, and we set a time to meet at a small diner halfway between our places. When she showed up, right off the bat, I could tell this wasn't going to be a quick chat. She had that serious look on her face, the one where you know they've rehearsed what they're going to say. She sat down and started in, saying, Colton, I don't think you're understanding the situation. I thought, I understand it just fine. I'm paying for my kids, and that's that. But I let her talk. She went into this whole thing about how I need to look at the bigger picture, and how this isn't just about a school trip. It's about setting a standard for how we'll handle things going forward, she said. I guess she thought framing it as a big family philosophy would make me feel obligated to agree. She said, this trip is just one example, and in the future there will be other activities, events, maybe even family vacations, and we should be on the same page about treating all the kids equally. I couldn't believe it. Was she seriously suggesting I pay for family vacations for all her kids now? I listened, trying not to react too much, because I knew if I got heated, it would only make things worse. Then she brought up the fairness argument again, like it was some kind of hammer she just loved swinging. She said, your kids get to do these things, and the others don't. It's going to cause resentment. They're going to feel left out. She even went as far as to say it could damage the kids' relationships with each other, that they'd grow up with this inequality that'd tear them apart. I sat there, thinking, and are there already different kids from different families with different lives? Why is this my problem to solve? When she finished, I tried to keep my voice calm and said, I get that you want all the kids to feel equal, but these aren't my kids. They're not my responsibility. I reminded her that we've been doing this parallel parenting thing for a while. She handles things on her end, and I handle things on mine. But apparently, she'd decided that's not enough anymore. That's when she dropped the real kicker. She said, so if you really cared about the kids' well-being, you want to support the whole family, not just your kids. She went on about how I needed to show good faith by stepping up for the other kids as well. I almost laughed out loud because it felt absurd. Since when does supporting your kids mean taking on everyone else's kids too? At that point, I felt myself starting to lose it. I told her, look, I do care about my kids' well-being. That's why I'm willing to do these things for them. But I'm not going to let you guilt-trip me into paying for kids that aren't mine. She didn't like that. She got defensive and said, you're being selfish and not thinking about how this will affect the kids in the long run. I fired back, how is it selfish to take care of my own kids? You made the choice to add these other kids into your household. That's not on me. Then her husband showed up. I don't know if she planned for him to just happen to stop by, but suddenly he was there, coming over to our table. He barely acknowledged me and went straight to Ember like he was about to save the day. He sat down across from me and immediately started in like he'd been waiting for this chance. He said, don't think you're being fair. We're supposed to be creating a family here, and your actions are putting up barriers. I stared at him, wondering if he seriously thought I'd buy into this we're all family thing when it came to my wallet. I told him straight up, son, I'm here to support my twins. That's what I signed up for. You can't expect me to pretend all these other kids are mine financially. Then he hit me with, well, if the kids start hating each other, that's on you. You're the one creating division. That set me off. I told him, you're the one pushing for me to play dad to kids that aren't mine. I'm not the one making this complicated. I just want to do right by my twins, and that's it. I didn't care if he thought I was being cold. I felt like they were ganging up on me, making me feel like the bad guy for having boundaries. Things got heated after that. Ember jumped in, saying, if the kids grow up resenting each other, it'll be because you didn't care enough to support our family vision. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I told her, Tiff, if that's the case, maybe you and your husband need to figure out a way to handle it. But don't put it all on me. By this point, people in the diner were giving us looks. I didn't care. I was fed up with being made to feel like the villain. I just wanted to do something nice for my kids, and it had spiraled into this mess about what I owed her household. It was like they expected me to fund whatever came up for every kid under their roof because they decided to blend their families. I stood up and said, look, I've said my piece. My focus is on my twins, and that's not changing. If you want everything to be equal, maybe you need to look at what you guys are doing, not what I'm doing. I'm done being the bad guy here. With that, I walked out feeling a mix of frustration and relief. It was clear no matter what I said, they weren't going to get it. As I left, I could feel their eyes on me like they were waiting for me to give in. But I was done. After that disaster of a conversation, I thought things might cool down. I figured Ember and her husband would get the point and drop it. But I should have known better. The whole thing didn't disappear, it got worse. A few days later, I started getting long-winded texts from her family members. It started with her sister, who's usually chill and stays out of our issues. Suddenly, she's texting me about how it's important for the kids to feel like they're in one big family. She started with messages like, if you really cared about your kids' happiness, you'd be willing to do this for them. It felt like she was implying I was doing something wrong just because I didn't want to pay for her sister's stepkids. At first, I tried to ignore it, thinking she'd eventually let it go. But the messages kept coming, and they got less nice. It went from subtle suggestions to flat-out accusations. Suddenly, I was selfish, stingy, not thinking about the bigger picture. They made it sound like I was tearing their happy family apart just because I didn't want to fund a trip for kids who aren't mine. It was like I'd declared war on them or something. Then it got worse. Ember's mom called me. I hadn't spoken to her in a while, so I was surprised to see her name pop up on my phone. I figured she'd want to talk about the twins, maybe have a calm discussion. Nope. The moment I answered, she launched into this speech about how things should be. She said, if you just paid for all the kids, this wouldn't be an issue. You need to think about how much better it would be if you were more involved with all the children. I felt my patience slipping. I told her, with all due respect, those kids are not my responsibility. I'm doing right by my own kids, and that's what I signed up for. But she didn't let up. She kept going, saying, a good man steps up and takes care of the whole family, not just his own. I was floored. I tried to explain, I want the best for my twins, but that doesn't mean I have to financially support every kid or daughter brought into the household. I added firmly, I'm not going to feel bad for taking care of my own kids and setting boundaries. She wasn't listening. The conversation spiraled, with her repeating the same lines about my duty as a father and how the kids would suffer if I didn't step up. She played the guilt card hard. By the end, I was done. I told her we weren't going to agree, politely ended the call, and that was that. But the pressure didn't stop. Over the next week, it felt like they were rallying the whole family against me. Ember's brother left a passive-aggressive comment on one of my social media posts about being a dad, saying, "Real dads support their families no matter what." It was obvious he wasn't talking about just my kids. I didn't respond. I deleted the comment and moved on, but it still annoyed me. I'm doing my best for my twins, and somehow that makes me the bad guy in their eyes. One day, I dropped the kids off at Ember's, and as I was heading back to my car, her husband caught up to me. No hi, no small talk. He just jumped right in. He said, "You know you're hurting the kids with this." I was taken aback. I thought we'd hash this out, but he wasn't done. He went on about how my decision not to pay for all the kids is driving a wedge between the siblings and how I need to be more considerate of the family dynamic. I told him, and I'm not hurting anyone. I'm taking care of my kids. They're not the ones struggling here. He wouldn't drop it. He kept going on about how everyone in the family thinks I'm unfair and how it's only a matter of time before the kids pick up on it and resent each other. It felt like he was laying the whole weight of the family's happiness on my shoulders. I looked him straight in the eye and said, "And your family's opinion doesn't change my responsibilities. I'm not their dad. I'm here for my kids, and that's not going to change." At that point, I honestly didn't know what else to say. No matter what I did, they were going to see me as the villain. That night, I sat alone trying to figure out how it had come to this. All I wanted was to take care of my kids and give them good experiences, and somehow, I was being painted as some cold-hearted guy who didn't care about family unity. They just couldn't see the line between what's fair and what's not. I vented to a couple of close friends about it. One of them shook his head and said, "Man, that's ridiculous. If they're so worried about the kids missing out, why don't they just pitch in and fund the trip themselves?" I laughed, but it was bitter, because it really felt like her whole family had decided I was obligated to be an all-in parent to kids who weren't mine, just to keep the peace with people who didn't respect my boundaries. The whole thing left a bad taste in my mouth. Texts and calls kept coming from random family members, all pushing the same line. I was over it. It felt like they'd built up this idea that I owed them something, and they weren't going to drop it until I caved. By the end of that week, I realized reasoning with them was pointless. They weren't looking for an explanation. They wanted me to fall in line. But I told myself I wasn't going to let them wear me down. My kids are my responsibility, and I wasn't going to let this extended family guilt trip change that. It's crazy that all this started from me trying to pay for my kids' school trip, but it turned into a battle over who's doing enough for the whole family. They may not like it, but I know where I stand. After that week of nonstop messages, friendly advice, and guilt tripping from Ember's family, I knew I had to make a final call on my boundaries and stick to them. No exceptions. It was clear that no matter how much I explained myself, they weren't going to get it. They were laser-focused on this one big happy family idea, and apparently, I was the guy standing in the way just because I refused to pay for every kid they added to their home. First, I talked to my twins about the upcoming trip. I wanted to make sure they were still excited and didn't feel awkward about it because, after all the drama, the last thing I wanted was for them to feel guilty. I kept it simple and said, "Hey, I'm really looking forward to this trip for you guys, and I want you to know this is something special for just the two of you." I didn't go into the messy details, but I wanted them to know it was okay to enjoy something for themselves. Both of them seemed relieved. They picked up on some tension. Kids always do, but they were happy and genuinely excited to go. That was a huge weight off my shoulders. I needed them to know they deserve nice experiences without feeling responsible for anyone else. With that settled, I knew I had to set clear boundaries with Ember and her family. Not just a vague "I'm paying for my kids" only boundary, but a real line they'd understand couldn't be crossed. I called her, keeping it calm and straightforward because I didn't want another hour-long argument. I said, "Look, my role as a parent is to support my twins. I'm here for them, and I'm doing what I can to give them good experiences. But that doesn't extend to other children who aren't mine. I respect your choices and your family, but my financial responsibility ends with my twins." Of course, she wasn't thrilled. She immediately started in on how the other kids would feel, how it's not fair for siblings to have different experiences. I let her talk for a bit, but when she started down the guilt-tripping path again, I stopped her. I said firmly, "I hear you, and I understand how you feel, but this is my final decision. I'm not paying for any extra expenses outside of our twins. If you want to work something out for your household, that's up to you, but you need to stop putting that pressure on me." There was silence for a few moments after I laid it all out, and I could tell she was fuming on the other end of the line. I almost expected her to launch into one last desperate pitch, trying to wear me down, but after a beat, she must have realized it wasn't going anywhere. She finally said, "Fine. I guess you've made your choice." The tone was dripping with that classic, "I'm disappointed in you" vibe, like she wanted me to feel guilty. But honestly, I didn't. By then, I felt more relief than anything else. I was done explaining myself. After that call, things got quieter. No more random texts from her family showing up out of nowhere. No more passive-aggressive comments on my posts. Just silence. It was a little awkward, sure, but mostly it felt good to have some peace. I think they realized I wasn't going to bend to their demands, and they had to come to terms with it. In the weeks leading up to the trip, I made an effort to spend extra time with the twins doing normal, everyday stuff. Grabbing a bite, hitting the park, watching movies, just the usual. I wanted to keep things feeling steady and safe for them, so they wouldn't get caught up in all the adult drama swirling around. It was refreshing, honestly, to just focus on them without the noise. Then the day of the trip arrived. I dropped them off at school that morning, and they were all smiles, bubbling with excitement. Seeing them so genuinely happy after everything was a real win. As they ran off to join their friends, I felt this deep sense of satisfaction wash over me. I thought, yeah, this is what it's about. It's not about trying to make everyone happy or bending over backward for people who don't appreciate it. It's about giving my kids the best I can and teaching them that it's okay to set boundaries. Here's the kicker. The day after the trip, I got a call from Ember. I braced myself for some snarky comment or a passive-aggressive jab, but instead, she asked, "Did the kids have fun?" I told her they did, keeping it short because I wasn't about to dive back into the old arguments. Then she caught me off guard. She said, "Saint, and I didn't agree with you, but I respect that you stood up for yourself and your kids." I guess I needed to hear that. I was shocked. I hadn't expected her to come around like that. It wasn't an apology, not exactly, but it felt like an acknowledgement that maybe I wasn't the villain they'd painted me to be. Since then, things have been a lot more peaceful. I don't hear from her family anymore, and it feels like we've reached a new level of understanding. We might not see eye to eye on everything, but we've accepted our roles in the kids' lives. Honestly, I think it's made me a better dad because I'm not constantly second-guessing every decision, wondering how it'll affect her household. I'm just focusing on what's best for my twins. In the end, this whole situation taught me something important. Sometimes setting boundaries isn't just about saying no to others. It's about saying yes to your own peace of mind. I've learned it's okay to prioritize my family and not feel guilty about it. If others don't get it, well, that's on them, not me. Things are in a good place now. The twins are happy, I'm happy, and it feels like we're moving forward without all the extra baggage. I made it clear where I stand, and I think everyone, even Ember and her husband, has come to respect that. It's not perfect, and I'm sure there'll be bumps down the road, but I know I can stand my ground and make decisions that are best for my family without getting lost in everyone else's expectations. A few weeks after things had settled down, I thought I'd finally heard the last of the demands. But then Ember hit me with something new. Out of nowhere, she started talking about the twins' living situation at her place and how they don't have the same comforts they have with me. At first, I thought she was just venting, maybe frustrated with her own circumstances. But then she dropped a hint, a big one, that I should do something about it. Turns out, she wanted me to buy a house. Not for me, but for the kids. She said it wasn't fair for them to go back and forth between two different standards of living and that it could hurt their self-esteem if they felt like they were lacking at her place. I was trying to process if she was serious, but nope, she was dead serious. She expected me to buy a second house for the kids to stay in when they're with her, so she could live there too. All on my dime. I tried to keep calm, but I had to ask, does that even make sense? You already have a home. She immediately went off about how their house is too small for a family her size and how it's affecting the kids' mental well-being. She started talking about equal standards, like it was my job to make up for every choice she'd made since we split. When I told her flat out that wasn't going to happen, she pulled out every guilt trip in the book. She said, "Don't you want the kids to feel just as comfortable at my place as they do with you? It's unfair that you're not willing to provide for their full living experience." She made me out to be some cold-hearted jerk just because I didn't want to buy her family a new house. At that point, I was done. I told her, "Look, the twins have everything they need at your place. If you think they need a bigger house, that's something you and your husband can handle. I'm not responsible for upgrading your home." She was quiet for a moment, then snapped back. "Well, if the kids end up feeling like they have a real home only with you, that'll be on you." I just shook my head. That was the end of the conversation. I don't know how she thought this was a reasonable request. I want the best for my kids, sure, but that doesn't mean I'm buying her a whole new lifestyle. I guess there's no limit to what she'll ask for, but I'm clear now. It took me a while to get to this point, but after that whole mess with Ember asking me to buy her a house, for her, her husband, and her stepkids, I realized things had gone too far. I wasn't just dealing with unreasonable requests anymore. I was watching my kids get pulled deeper into a family dynamic where their needs were secondary, and I couldn't ignore that any longer. One night, After putting the twins to bed during their weekend stay, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the same family court paperwork I'd looked at a dozen times before. But this time, I didn't hesitate. I filled it out. I filed a motion to modify the custody agreement and pursue full custody. Not out of spite, not out of ego, out of necessity. When the court date came, I showed up prepared. I'd kept records, texts, emails, even voice messages. But more than that, I spoke from the heart. When the judge asked why I was seeking full custody, I said, "Your Honor, I've done everything I can to co-parent peacefully. I've respected the agreement. I've gone out of my way to support my children emotionally, financially, and in every way I know how. But lately, I've been put under increasing pressure to provide for Ember's stepchildren as if they're my own, at the expense of my kids. And when I say no, it causes stress, confusion, and guilt for my twins. That's not a stable environment. That's not co-parenting. That's coercion, and it's hurting them." The judge listened closely, taking notes. Ember, sitting across from me with her lawyer, stayed quiet most of the time. Maybe she thought I wouldn't go through with it. Or maybe she didn't think I had a case. But then the judge did something I hadn't expected so soon. He ordered a child services agent to visit both households and speak with the twins privately. That week felt like a month. When the agent arrived at my home, she was polite but observant, taking notes about everything: the kids' room, their schedules, how I interacted with them. She talked to them alone for a while. I didn't eavesdrop. I just waited, hoping that whatever they said reflected the truth of what they'd been feeling. A few days later, the court reconvened. I walked in with nerves running high, but the moment the judge spoke, I felt everything shift. The Child Services report indicates that while both parents provide shelter, the emotional environment at the mother's household appears strained. The twins stated they often feel neglected in comparison to the stepchildren and expressed feeling pressure to sacrifice or compromise their needs to keep peace in the household. They expressed a clear and consistent desire to live primarily with their father. He paused, looked up from the report, and continued. In addition, the court finds that Mr. Reese has demonstrated a consistent and responsible pattern of care, support, and stability for the children. It is in the best interest of the minors to modify the custody arrangement. Effective immediately, full physical custody is awarded to Mr. Reese. I exhaled for the first time in what felt like days. Ember didn't say much. She looked stunned, like she couldn't believe the emotional weight she'd been throwing around had finally caught up to her. I didn't feel victorious. I felt resolved. Later that evening, when I told the twins they'd be living with me full-time, they both jumped up and hugged me. Lila said, "So we don't have to go back there anymore?" And Derek just whispered, "Thanks, Dad." I hugged them both and said, "You're home now. For good." It wasn't about winning. It was about protecting them. And now, for the first time in a long time, I know they're exactly where they belong. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.